now. So lining around here, I want to get off and going. Talk was mostly around kind of some of the things we do here in our lab, but I wanted to ultimately get back to some of the ways we evaluate the type of work we do. All right, so I think to be helpful here, you kind of have to have an understanding of the type of lab that we're in. The Gregory School Lab, where I work, it's located in Tucson, Arizona. It's a grade 5 through 12 private school. So I work with pretty small classes at time, and that really is part of the types of projects that we get to take on. Our lab started in 2015, so it's 8 years of accumulated projects, physical items, junk in the room, lots of curriculum that we've kind of done and things that we need to develop. We've got templates and project databases, but so there's things built up, but there's always things that we want to do better and kind of grow more of. And one of the things we mentioned here is our school works on what we call our exploration schedule. So it's kind of like a 20% time in industry where students have a lot of flexibility to choose a day a week. If it's a 5-day week, it'll be on Fridays. They'll choose workshops and they'll choose projects that they're working on throughout that day. So it gives us a lot of flexibility in Fab Lab to kind of introduce new curriculum. So it's a big part of who we are. Just like any lab, we have these things that we really want to get accomplished. And we kind of have our school goals, and then we kind of have these Fab Lab goals as well. And so within the Fab Lab, we're really trying to do a lot more design education. I just don't think it's very present and very, in courses, there's just a lot. Maker education, love that tactile, learn by doing type of thing that a lot of places do. Love the fact that in maker education, you're often encouraging learning and teaching amongst each other. And, collaborative work, doing creative work, being able to communicate, those are things that we're trying to find more and more ways and avenues to explore. And, most of all, when someone comes into our lab, we're talking about our major goal is to get the tools, the knowledge, and the resources so that when a student has an idea, we can turn it into action. And we often use this expression action instead of a physical prototype because we know that the skills that the students are using in making the physical stuff that often comes out of a Fab Lab should be, transformed into other places as well so that they're able to actually utilize those skills. So we are constantly kind of trying to create a message for our lab about how we get accomplished. I think that's always just a hard part of, well, what is the purpose of a Fab Lab? What do my students learn there? What are we teaching? And I have a colleague who came back to work with abilities kind of template here concept and some note cards that have been around for a long time that it started to become part of our lab experience. So into and being the type of resources available for the D school, particularly around these disabilities, sizes will highlight the types of things that they are hoping to develop with these design abilities. These became, for us, the skills that we wanted to develop. This is what we wanted to prioritize. And so we were choosing projects, choosing classroom experiences. We wanted to adopt this language. We wanted to utilize the resources from the school and other places that have developed their design abilities. And one thing we have with our lab is you're constantly bringing in new projects. You're constantly supporting new classes. And we really needed some filtering of where to prioritize our time and our resources so that we were kind of getting the outcomes that we wanted, developing the skills that we wanted to, and we were able to actually articulate which skills we were able to, we're working on and hoping to develop. So this has become a large part of who we are. I want to touch on a couple of those just from a project standpoint here. Navigating ambiguity. It's one of my favorite ones. It's like the super skill of the whole group there. We and in particular me are kind of heavily virtual structured. So a lot of open-ended projects, a lot of student-driven projects, independent studies, things like that. But that's not really the only place in which we want to encourage education. We are looking at from our youngest grades, how do we introduce this concept? So to give an example, like we have a 6th grade history class that is regularly comes in, and they use a common project. It's develop an island, a monument, a national park, or something that celebrates a piece of history. And they kind of always have this interesting starting point when they come into the lab. They're new. They're often sixth graders who this might be their first time in the laboratory. They're asking, what can I do? They want to talk explicit skills. And often the conversation has to flip. Well, what do you want to get accomplished? What were your ideas you've already come in here with? What was the thing that you're trying to represent? Can you show me your work? Can you show me kind of some drawings? Can you show me a model? And then we kind of help them navigate what are the tools that are actually available to them in the laboratory space. Where can they kind of integrate those into their project so that we're not teaching explicitly the tools, but allowing them to kind of organically learn the tools that they want to. This is the project in the top right corner here. A student does in one of our classes, a design build class. We had kind of that same interaction the other day. She said she wanted to build a body out for her animatronic. She's kind of coded out. She's got the face all working. And now she wants a body. So we start throwing in, okay, well, here's some options that we know in the laboratory. We could make it out of wood. We could maybe do a paper mache. We could do some foam crafting like here, or maybe we could do fiberglassing. We talk about what it would take to take each path and let her choose the path to kind of go down. The bottom example here is just, an open-ended project on one of our workshop days. The students just came in with this prompt, and it was just, we need to make labels for the books in the farmyard. So when we get lots of different ideas, lots of so many different types of art output and input and different techniques. So some of them are on the vinyl cutter, some of them are cutting, wood stamps, and we're kind of pressing and making them and moving them through. But just love this idea of navigating ambiguity where we're talking about not always knowing where to end up, not knowing how to make a roadmap. And I often think it's, it's not always in it, not being knowing what we're doing. It's actually what the roadmap is, we're going with our into some clarity. Another one I love to emphasize is that concrete to abstract. This is one that I have a lot of times easier ability to connect teachers here and their understanding of why we have a Fab Lab and what skills we're working to. When we kind of either tour through with students or introduce a student to the laser cutter, we're often talking about that progression that we see in students as they have more time to utilize that process. So, early on, it's a 2D, they learn to design keychains and ornaments and very flat surface, maybe they etch a picture or something like that. But we see their growth. We see that spatial reasoning grow over time. They start making 3D models. They learn techniques for kind of joining wood and then expanding on their projects overall. And then eventually we see them taking those 3D projects and giving them motion, tying motors to them, being able to cut arms and pieces that articulate, so that we're actually seeing a growth in that spatial reasoning and their ability to transform that. 3D modeling is the same way. We see these spatial reasonings grow with kind of extrusions and revolutions and different ways of kind of doing that. And the mathematics of it are just fascinating with the additions and subtractions of shapes. And those really get us back to some of those mathematical connections, which makes it easier for us to say, hey, this is why we're doing this. And this is why a math class might want to come into our space and use this space for their own benefit. The bottom picture here is one of my favorite projects we've done, which is like, it's from an English class, and we just say, come in here and design a structure to show a structure. So they've learned and read some piece of literary work, and some students in their modeling of work are very direct and understanding. Some of them really kind of get the different figures of speech and can articulate that in their designs, and are able to really show different interpretations and skills to kind of master all the literary devices. So this one's great to me because you see students with a really rich piece of literary reading there that they're able to interpret, and some are getting it and some may not in their capturing with a physical model. Building and crafting intentionally those design abilities that we really get the chance to work with younger students on. It's that first phase of what it means to prototype, what it means to practice, failing, redoing, getting feedback, doing project management. We have this ability to kind of emphasize growth mindset. It's time to get to a project, take that time, learn how to not just plan the turning in of an assignment, but to plan the process. And so students have to know that they're not going to just do it one time, that they need to do it one time and they're going to come back and finish it up. I often, like when a student is starting something, like to emphasize the time that a skill really takes. And so on the far right here, I kind of highlighted a general guideline that I give them. This comes from various degrees of research here. And, you know, I had a student the other day that just picked up using Blender to do some modeling. And I told her, I said, you know, don't give up for about 20 hours, because once you start getting into that 20-hour mark, the tools will just start making sense, and that you'll be able to navigate that space a lot easier. We want them, you know, eventually over time to have the time in the lab to ever get past this skill building set and into this 100-hour area there. And a lot of students who are taking home CAD models and working on them there are seeing that process kind of emerge, where they're moving from that 20-hour, I learned how to use a tool, to 100 hours and I can really do what I want to do. And after that, you know, just kind of referencing some numbers that the students are kind of always interested in is, you know, maybe after 1,000 hours, I'm starting to consider myself an early professional. And I often use that 10,000 hour mark that is kind of famous by Malcolm Gladwell for, like, that's about the point in which you become a master and you kind of use some expertise there. All right, so just to give a little more to what we do, because we're trying to get those design abilities into our work. I only showed 3 of them, but that's because that's what I thought would work well here. But we actually do a lot of, we want to get in, get out, show a skill, let that skill kind of have a few little pieces of that in there. We do this through introductory activities, lots of icebreakers, things that we find in design thinking work, things that we find from different places. We do classroom PBL, which is our first kind of introduction of taking a class into the Fab Lab space. So it might be a history project for an entire week where they come in, they use the Fab Lab to do something. It might be a math project. Those classroom PBLs have been really valuable to us because we want the space to be for everybody. So if we intentionally go out and find classes that are particularly not STEM classes and get them into that classroom, it gets the students seeing the space as not just a STEM space. It also brings in audiences. We know that kind of from other researches that if a student isn't kind of introduced into the lab, that there are certain students who, if they're not kind of forced into that space, would never see that space as their own. And it's a big goal of ours to make everybody see that the Fab Lab is a space that a student can come in and do a work and turn their ideas into their own projects and make it really more about individual growth there. We also run these workshops. So that's kind of, a student can initiate a workshop on a Friday expiration, other teachers initiate workshops, but those are kind of what we consider our skill builders. We work through developing skills in a number of ways, one of which is through a design build class, which is where the students kind of come in with an idea and they just have to work it through on their own. So we're doing digital design work. There are classes devoted towards students learning particular digital software. And then we offer more workshops that are kind of at advanced level here. Like the one over here, we just had a couple of weeks and we said, design a piece of a chair, you know? And so these are 2 models that we actually put together on the laser cutter. One of them, we ended up extended into a much larger chair, but that's a very open-ended chair. Look like they both chose, you know, working towards younger kids. And this is where we spend a lot of time in the lab. Students have a lot of autonomy where they're working on mostly engineering projects and entrepreneurship projects. One of our big projects in entrepreneurship would be like, go design a toy. It's very open-ended and it's something that students actually understand. They've all been users of toys and they've all been, they kind of know that audience. So we're able to actually go in and teach the skills of interacting with other people, teach the skills of having students not just make for themselves, but make for somebody else. And then the entrepreneurship class will go off and just make a product, you know, so they're not just given a pathway, they're just told, here's what you do. And we give them the framework to kind of move through. But there are a lot of just navigating the ambiguity, like, well, what skills do I need to do? What do I not know? And how do I learn the things that I don't know? All right, I think I'm pretty close to my limit. Is that true? Or is...
Officially, you have about 3 more minutes, and then we have a little bit of time for open-ended questions.
Okay, then I will kind of, so lots of different projects here. Our engineering is mostly focused around solving a global design challenge. We actually do this as a partnership with the University of Arizona here as one of our classes, and then kind of our own in another. But in an engineering design challenge, like make solar energy affordable. So right now, students are actually building a solar panel that can track the sun. And the purpose of that is, well, okay, we're trying to learn, are we supposed to do that? Or is this a good technique? Is this something that we would actually utilize? Or are there other better ways of solving this problem? So they actually build these models, we're testing them, we see them kind of come to fruition. All of these things take time. And so we give the students that type of space and let them kind of grow into learning to use the tools and figuring out what they need and how to use them. Okay, you know, if we're doing stuff, maker education stuff, we just go all over the place with any time a workshop can kind of just pop up on a Friday expiration. We just pick and choose. It is a little more explicit as far as what we're hoping to teach. Probably not as focused on those design abilities, learning objectives, but often they're in support of. So if a student in one of those classes might need to know how to do a silkscreen, it's a lot easier to break that out of a course just for them, to run a workshop for a few students, and then teach that skill and let them utilize that in their project. And then, you know, we are going on what we consider our design world, which is teaching software. I love using software from the Autodesk family. I love we use the Adobe family here, but it takes a lot of time to teach those skills. And it's just a big part of kind of that overall process that we hope to do. And then we want to kind of incorporate those with big, meaningful, rich projects. So it's a quick thing that we try to get across, but one of the highlights here is that we continually kind of look at that design ability. We say, these are the things that we really want to see grow in our students. And when a project comes in, we kind of see, okay, well, what skills here are they using? Oftentimes, kind of like Michael Stone just mentioned there, if you're teaching directly, like, hey, here's how we use the laser cutter, you find yourself not always getting as many of those skills involved. But when you kind of go off and build some of these larger projects, all of a sudden you see, well, the students did all these different things, and we see that growth happening there. And that's where we actually use that as our kind of evaluating tool for ourselves and see, okay, we're doing a good job with our time here, and this is really worth our time. All right, I'm up for questions now. I can definitely talk more on projects. I know, like, I try to go as quick as I can, but I really only do these presentations because I love to get feedback and really would like to learn from some of you about, you know, what ideas are out there and where we should be going and future of this thing. And most of these ideas I borrow, but it's just part of kind of being a teacher, I think, and learning what to do with them.
Okay. Rodney has his camera off, so that means someone else has to start the question. Oh, camera's on.
Kick it off. Is there an assessment tool that you use to like assess student work when they're doing these projects? And are they like, is this a lab? Is this outside of the class time? Or is this, you know, in connection with that?
Most of the work we do, I say, is part of the class time. So they will, if we're working with an individual teacher, that might be part of their rubric. It's not always the best way to kind of assess. So some of the best work is more open-ended in my mind, and we ask the students to bring things like portfolios. We ask our entrepreneurship class to get on the stage and give a 10-minute elevator pitch. And it's really hard not to see, you know, those are pretty great assessments in my mind, that they're actually willing to present their work and willing to step on stage and be part of that. Here it is. And then we evaluate the best we can because we're a school.
Awesome.
Okay, I think we got about 4 more minutes before we'll shift back to the main session. Anyone else have questions for any of our presenters?
I just want to say I really like using the D-School principles because I feel like those are timeless. Like it doesn't matter. You might replace your Arduino with a Raspberry Pi or a Muse laser cutter with another brand, but the overarching concepts will live on, right? And I think it'd be cool to find some kind of badging system for those instead of like tool specific, right?
I think for us, it was about messaging, just because it was hard to have, any person come into the lab and say, well, you need to learn this or learn to that, when we were talking about the 3D printer, the laser cutter. But those terms were timeless in my mind as far as, yeah, these are the skills that we really want to see our students take with them.
That's great. I appreciated the slides there at the end that just encapsulated, this is all we do, and these are the software and tools we use to do that. I'm glad we're recording this. I'm going to go back and snippet those because
Yeah, it can be lots of different things. I love the fact that Fab Labs all have their, different pieces that they want to do. And I just love learning myself. So I'm like, I go out and I know that skill and that skill and that skill. And, hopefully you can find a student to do it with you. And it makes it a lot easier to actually finish learning some of those skills because they're willing to learn them with you.
Great. Well, I feel especially fortunate to have been the mediator here and two very wonderful and different presentations coming from two very different viewpoints. I've learned a lot from all of you. Thank you for taking the time to put your presentations together and be here today. Last chance, anyone else with a question? This session is recorded, and I know Liz will get it up on the website as soon as she can. So thank you again. Any other questions before we leave our room here? Thanks again, everyone, for coming, and see you later in the afternoon.